Now that we have developed our plan, as we can see here on the right, we should be able to implement this script. And we will try to follow it as carefully as we can. Maybe there are some modifications that we figure out while we implement it, but to start, we create the script. And we can see here that we are going to work with a main method, so let's start by adding that. And what is the first thing that we're going to do in our main method? We're going to generate a random number. So how do we do that? We must assign a random number to a variable. I'm going to call mine target. And now we're supposed to generate a random number. To do that, we must first import a module called random. And when we have done that, we can generate this random number. And in the text we said it should be between 0 and 1000. So here we have that. We managed the first step here. Now we're supposed to open the file guesses.txt, so let's do that. We continue on in our plan here, and we see that alright, now it's time for a loop. As long as there are more entries, I'm going to solve this in the following way. I'm going to create a variable called more entries. I set it to true to begin with because I assume that there are entries in the file, and as long as this variable holds true, we will continue in our loop. And if we look in our diagram, we can see down here we have figured out that there are no more entries. So when we get here, I will set it to false and we will exit the loop. But if we continue here to see that, alright, if there are more entries, what shall we do? We shall read the name and continue down here. So I added a little bit of code, and let's take a look at what I actually added. What we saw last was that we had this while loop here that would continue as long as there were more entries. If we compare the code that we have here now to what we have in our diagram, we can see that, alright, we should read our name from the file. We do that on this line here. After that, we're going to check if the name is equal to an empty string that we do on this line here. There's the if statement to check if it is, and if it is empty, we should have no more entries. So we see that, alright, I have already made a mistake here. I have to correct this because this else should belong to checking for the name here. If we have another entry, if we have another entry, we're going to go in here. But if we don't have a new entry so that the name is empty, we should say that, alright, there are no more entries. So we can see that these belong together. So here we set it to false, meaning that the next iteration in the loop, it will jump out. But alright, what if there is an entry? What should we do then? Then we should read the guess from the file. So we have to remember that the first line is the name, the second line is that person's guess. So that is what we're reading. And we do that on this line here. When we have the guess, we can compare the guess to the target that we generated up here. And if they are the same, if they're equal, we will print the name, which we have here. So we can see now that the code corresponds fairly well to what we have in our diagram. So if we take our time, develop our plan, writing the code is much easier because we have kind of the recipe here for how to write it. But now that we have it, let's try to run it and see what happens. And we can see that there is no output. I will change one thing for now because I know that my guess is 726. So let's imagine instead of a random number, the number that we're looking for is 726, which I happen to know is my guess. So if we run it again, we see that, all right, now that the target number is the same as my number that I guessed previously, then we can see that it writes my name. So if we stop here, and what can we take with us here? It was the thing that I mentioned before. If we take our time, develop a plan that look a little bit complicated to start with, but if we take our time doing that, writing the code afterwards is simpler. Not simple maybe, but simpler. And we can use this as a reference to see that, all right, I made a mistake here, and I could figure it out before we ran it the first time when I was looking at my code and comparing it to what I have been thinking about before, how to solve it. So that is one of the things that we should take with us from this task. And of course also reading from files.